Hi everyone, welcome back to That's Debatable. Today we're going to be talking about Griselda, and if you don't know who Griselda is, well, you're about to know. So here we go. So if you guys don't know, recently Sofia Vergara came out with the biopic on Netflix of Griselda, and Griselda was this notorious woman who basically kind of built the infrastructure of Coke the way that we know it now. The way that Miami is kind of pushed up, the way that Miami is the way that it is now is because of Griselda. And we're going to touch a little bit upon what the story was. If you guys don't know it that way, you guys know what I'm talking about. But obviously there's a whole entire biopic, so we're not going to get into excruciating detail about it. But back in the 70s, 60s, this was before Pablo Escobar. And when I say Pablo Escobar, I feel like everybody's like, the light goes off in their head and they kind of know what I'm talking about. She was before him. She was what people like to know as the godmother of cocaine. She was at a time where women weren't really in situations like this. They weren't really had a voice to say things of themselves, but she ran an entire industry that was completely male dominated. And not only did she run it, she was very well respected within it because of how ruthless she was. And it was really interesting to see Sofia Vergara in a different light outside of Modern Family. This was a huge jump for her, and she did, I think, an amazing job. So she had 4 sons, Griselda, and they were raised within this industry of things. And the only one to live out of this whole time period was Michael Corleone, which is her youngest. And he actually went on and wrote his own book about it and kind of talks about his experience being in that, because he talks about the discrepancies that Netflix had as opposed to what was actually happening behind the scenes. And although she was the media knows this as a ruthless woman, she was very much a family person. She loved her family. That was her end all be all. She was always ready to go. It's a little interesting to see this period of time and being portrayed by the media, because it sometimes does get glorified, even though the fact that innocent people did die during these times, but again, that is touched upon, but it's almost as even seen as a bad thing. But in the Netflix series, it starts with, they also called her the Black Widow because she would kill her husbands. She had multiple husbands and they were all shot done dead by her, allegedly. Let's just make it known for what it is. That's her son. And the series starts with basically her in Medellin, Colombia. And because again, she is from Colombia. And it starts with her basically having her husband, and her husband puts her in a really compromising position where they owe a lot of money because they were within the drug cartel business. And her husband owed a lot of money to his brother, who is another big heavyweight. And in the Netflix series, I don't know how much of this is true, but basically what ended up happening, in order for them to pay their dues back, Griselda had to go sleep with her husband's brother. And because of that, she was infuriated and she ended up shooting her husband, and she fled to Miami. So that's kind of how the Netflix starts. Now, one thing that, because Michael Corleone did a whole entire YouTube series kind of discussing everything on this podcast. And he talks about when they have the timeline wrong, because by the 70s, she was already this huge heavyweight in the drug cartel. There was the Ochoas, that was another huge family within the drug cartels. A lot of them ended up passing away because, when you're in a business like that, that's kind of, you don't really get the retirement plan of we work 25 years and then we're done. It's kind of like you work, you make all this money, and sometimes your end of the line happens to be a jail cell or death. That's kind of how that ends for most people, especially if you are one of the heavyweights in it. And that was kind of Griselda's fate at that point. Basically, he says by the 70s, she was this huge icon. And what they show in the Netflix series, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about a little bit, because I'm not here to tell his story. I'm here to tell the one that Sofia Vergara told, which, by the way, they are getting sued for. But I feel like families are always trying to sue just to get some type of compensation for it, but whatever. And I said what I said, and I would have said, and I'll say it again. But basically, she goes to Miami, and she just has 1 kilo. And I don't know what a kilo is, but just know it's basically like a brick a brick of the dirty lettuce nose. I mixed up, I put a whole bunch of drugs together. It's a lot of snow. It's a lot of snow in a brick. And essentially she couldn't sell it. She couldn't figure out how to sell it. She also had, this is tea. How she was able, and this was pre 9/11. Obviously, this is the 70s. So to get drugs in and out was a lot easier than doing it now. Now it's basically impossible. Trust me, I've tried. No, I'm kidding. I'm literally kidding. That's not funny at all. But no, it's impossible to do that now, especially the way that she was doing it back then. Because in the Netflix series, she has a friend that she goes and she meets her up in Miami, and she's like, I have my 3 sons. At that point, Michael Corleone was not born, allegedly. He says that he was born. And I mean, the way that the timeline is set up, at that point, he should have been born. And she's like, okay, well, I have nothing. I need to figure out what I'm going to do. I want to start a new life. I'm out of the drug business. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to provide a stable life for my children, for my sons. I don't think that they should grow up in this business. And her friend, who owned a travel agency at that point, was like, yeah, like, of course, like, what? Like, oh my God, I'm so happy you're out of this. Like, this is why I left Colombia, because we don't need to be doing this anymore. And she facilitates her. She kind of takes her in. And she's like, I will take you in just as long as you're out of that business. And Griselda's character, Sofia Vergara's character, Griselda, is like, I'm out. All the while, she has a kilo in her luggage and she's trying to sell it. But again, in real life terms, she was already on top of the world in Miami. And how she ended up doing it was she would have prostitutes from Colombia. She would buy them in brothels. She used a travel agency. There was like a whole episode about when the travel agent found out, and she was like, you lied to me. And she was like, I can change your life. Your travel agency is buns. Like, you're not making any type of money. Like, this is not good for you. I can help you, but you need to help me. So what they would do is the travel agent would book these tickets for these prostitutes from Colombia, and she would get them on flights, and Griselda would put pounds of cocaine in their bra. Like, in the inside of their bras, they would sew it in. So when they would go through the airport and they get pat down, they don't have anything because it's just a bra. I'm just wearing my bra. I just got some big old yitties. You don't touch them because that's inappropriate type, you know what I'm saying? And that's how she was able to get cocaine in. And she figured, in the Netflix series, and this is a discrepancy that Michael Corleone says, and I'm going to keep saying his name because he was named after the Godfather. That's how Griselda wanted him. I mean, that's a flex of a name, but whatever. And what she says is, by that point, she was like, we're not here to sell cocaine. We're here to sell a dream. We're here to sell this experience that, just take it and you're going to go crazy and you're going to go wild. And who needs that more than a white man that works in a 9 to 5 and goes crazy? Like, who needs it more than frat boys? Essentially is kind of how the story goes. And that's what happened. She would go into rich establishments and she would talk to all these like wealthy men and be like, listen, I have the purest of purest, the most expensive snow you could ever imagine. Just buy it. Just here, I'll give you a taste of it. You tell me how it goes. They would throw on these huge parties. And everybody would be like, oh my God, this is the party of a lifetime. I need more. And at that point, then that's how an addiction starts to build. So she started building her whole entire infrastructure in Miami like that, by going to these rich, super exclusive clubs where a lot of like white older people would go, and they kind of are looking for like people that are in their midlife crisis that are looking for like a moment to be like, oh, let's get crazy. Okay, well, I have this for you. And it's crazy too, because at that point, Michael Corleone says now, he's like, to be fair, cocaine is not cheap. He's like, so I understand why Netflix said that, oh, we're going to sell it to all like the white people, but those were the people buying it beforehand. It wasn't like what he says is, my mother saw an untapped market. And at that point, she said, this is Miami. Miami is nightlife. Cocaine is nightlife. These go hand in hand. We're just missing one key element of this equation, but I have it. So let's start building this. And that is why Miami is the way that it is. Miami is party central. Miami is everything. And it's all because of Griselda. And in that time, when everything was happening in Miami, they were like, when Miami would get too hot, because that's what they would say. It's like, Miami's too hot right now. They would go to New York and they would try to also build that. But this is when, as years started going on, now this is what Michael Corleone tells, because Netflix doesn't touch upon this part of her sons. But her son, I believe it was Uber, not the car girl, not the whip. She was way before her time. She could have created Uber. She had him as next in line to be the godfather of cocaine, because this woman was ruthless. She killed women, children, men. It didn't matter. If you owed her a debt, that debt was going to be repaid either with the money or with your life. That was it. And there was a moment that everything kind of like, everybody was trying to catch her from the moment that a liquor store got shot up because of the fact that somebody in there owed her money, or somebody in there disrespected her. And this is kind of how that business works. If you disrespect me, you're going to get yours. And they went into this liquor store and they just shot the entire place up. And this is kind of what ticked off the police. And the police was just kind of like, oh, something is happening, but we don't know who it is. And the last person that they thought it was going to be was a woman. And for a very long time, the reason why she was able to last as long as she did was because of the fact that nobody thought a woman would be in charge of an empire like this. The Ochoas, all the big drug cartel families feared this woman. Pablo Escobar, one of the lines that starts in the Netflix series is, there was one person that Pablo ever feared besides God, because they love Jesus. Columbians in their freaking Catholicism. But he was like, there's only one person on this earth that Pablo Escobar feared, and her name was Griselda. And Griselda kind of was the person that brought Pablo Escobar in and taught him the ropes of how to maneuver cocaine through Medellin, how to build up a route system, what territories are here. She basically taught him everything that he knows, which is crazy because a lot of the times you don't really get to, you don't ever really hear that part, but she really is the reason why cocaine has a huge industry behind it. One big thing is Michael Corleone's made it his life mission to tell his mother's story in his eyes, but he was also like a 5-year-old when all of this was happening. But he talks about also just knowing when things would go awry that people needed to die. And he basically says, he's like, I remember there was a moment that, my mother was talking to somebody, and basically I knew that it was one or two things. He was either, we have to disappear, or they have to disappear. And that's just kind of the life that he grew up in. And she had her right-hand man, Rivi, and he actually is the person that testified against her in court. But all that time in the Netflix show, it's actually really interesting because she gets caught. This is moving forward. She gets caught, because I'm not going to deep dive into her whole entire life because you guys can watch the Netflix show. It's actually really good. And when she gets caught in the Netflix show, they're like, okay, well, we have Revi and he's going to testify against you. And this is your right-hand man. Like, anybody that you sent to kill, he was that person. And he was allegedly tied to 30 different murders, but he was only convicted of a couple, which is a 2-year-old, which was another one of her right-hand man's son. And he ended up dying in that car shootout that they ended up having. And again, she was ruthless. And it was to a point where it's like you were scared to cross this woman because this woman didn't care. The only thing she cared about was her sons. And that was something that Michael Corleone was like, the one thing that they got right about the whole entire show was that she was a family woman. Everywhere she went, we went. It didn't matter what parties it was. It doesn't matter what was happening. We were there. And because of that, her sons, 2 of the older ones, Uber was obviously, again, supposed to take on the head of it. So he wanted to go to New York to start to create what they did in Miami. And he ended up doing that. And you see as they get older that they start becoming a part of like the drug cartel, which I mean, as a mother, it's kind of like, that takes on a whole nother meaning of like taking on the family business. Like, that's just like another crazy little thing happening. But they were making money on money on money on money. And this woman nobody was catching her. Until obviously things started slipping up, because there's always an end to this. Same thing with Pablo Escobar. There's always an end to this. There's never enough money that you can make in that industry because there's no ceiling. And that's basically what happens. Just greed takes over. And what ends up happening is she gets arrested and Revi is testifying against her, but also at the same time helping her, because he went on and he actually, because he was pretty handsome, and one of the people that were making the case against him, he ended up having phone sex with her in jail. And the whole time after that happens in the Netflix series, he gives a call to Griselda and he's like, "You're welcome." Hangs up the phone, and they drop all the charges against her because of the fact that now we can't have you testify against her when you were having sexual relations over the phone with somebody on the defendant's team. Like, that's crazy. You can't, now everything is dropped. So that case was gone. But she ended up dying when she was out. She was leaving, I think, a butcher shop, and she got shot twice on a motorcycle. I think her life ended in Medellin. So I think they had to flee back to Medellin. I know Michael Corleone, what's crazy, her husband at that time, who was also one of the right-hand men of her husband. This is like her husband that she shot because very early on, because she had to sleep with his brother. His brother comes to kill Griselda, and that person's right-hand man is Revi. Revi ends up killing him, and he's like, "I'm not going to let him hurt you. I took care of this. I'm now your right-hand man. Everything that you need, I live for you. I die for you. Your life is the most important thing in my hands." And that's pretty much how they kind of lived. They lived with heaps of security, heaps of like assassins, and not even assassins. They're called hitmen. Assassins are different because that's like then you're on salary. Hitman is like when I just like, it's like freelancers. It's like, oh, I gotta call you just to like do your little 1-2. And that's kind of what ended up happening. And then after that, obviously, once she died in 2012. By that point, Pablo Escobar was already dead. Medellin was already set up because of Pablo. And then Miami was set up because of Griselda. And New York was starting to get set up because of Uber. But her sons ended up getting shot, and all of them were killed except for Michael, just because of the industry that they're in, and also just to kind of get back at her. They were like, "We're going to take you're not here to protect them anymore, so now they're for the streets," and they killed them. And that's kind of how that ends up happening. I mean, the drug cartel, so don't get involved in it, but whatever. As far as the travel agent in the actual Netflix show, she wasn't a real person because it was comprised of 2 to 3 other people that were involved with Griselda at the time. And when Michael Corleone did the whole like lawsuit against Netflix saying that you didn't get our permission, you're not portraying my mother's story correctly, Netflix was like, "We don't care. We're going to do it. The claims they're not accurate. This isn't what's happening." Essentially, he just says that timeline of it is wrong, and they made her seem not as powerful as she actually was, which is crazy because in the actual show, like, you can kind of see that, like, well, you were running the shots. But Griselda Blanco was the person that pioneered all the routes. The way that the drug business is being run now is thanks to her. The routes of pushing in 100 kilos on a private jet to Miami from Medellin, like, all of that was created by her, curated by her. What a creative, what an artist. And I mean, hey, if you do something, I mean, she's the best at what she does. She found her passion, I guess. But more than anything, I think what I wanted to touch upon was kind of the reaction that not only the public, but more so the Latino community had when Griselda came out, because I think a tale as old as time is always the story of, especially stories of Colombia are always being told about Pablo Escobar, about Griselda, there's never like these stories of these people that have done amazing things for the country. It's always these like super heinous stories. And I remember when Narcos came out about Pablo Escobar, a lot of people were really angry because of the fact that Narcos kind of glorified him a little bit. They didn't really make him seem like the evil man that he actually was. Although, yes, he was a family man. I mean, again, he's a Latino man. He's a Latino woman. We're family people. What can we say? We do drugs, but we love our family. Like, that is very much the theme of all of these shows. And when Narcos came out, I remember that the Latino community was a little angry for the fact that it was like, you're telling these stories, but you're not telling these stories from the point of view of the people that lived it. You're telling it from the point of view of this super ultra drug cartel badass guy who would do anything and everything to get to the top, not taking into account the innocent lives that were killed. For example, Pablo Escobar, he had beef with some government official in Colombia, And what he would go around, because he was a poor boy from Colombia. He basically would go around to los pueblos, or the villages that were low income. I mean, Colombia's a third world country, so there's a lot of that. And he would give them money, and he'd said, hey, I need you to go to this place with this briefcase at this time. I'll give you and your family, I will take care of your family for the rest of your life. I will give you $500,000 just to go do this. And these families, I mean, have nothing. The way that they live is not, they're living in poverty. So for them, they're like, oh, of course, not realizing that one specific example of that was that he went into this poor family's house, and he told this young father, I need you to go on this plane, and I need you to hold this briefcase, and I will give you this much money, and I will take care of your wife and your child, but just do this one thing for me, and you'll come back safe and sound. All you need to do is just take this trip. That's it. That's all I'm asking you to do. Get on the plane, get there, get on the plane back. Just make sure you have that briefcase. That briefcase was actually a bomb, because what he wanted to do was, he knew that one of the government officials was going to be on that plane, and he wanted to kill that one person. And the only way to kill him, because of obviously he was a government official, was to make it seem in the most relaxed area you possibly can think of. Is a plane. You're on a plane, whatever. If you're going to kill somebody, you think that they're going to just do like a drive-by. Not Pablo. He put this little boy on a plane, put him on a briefcase, and the government officials got like tipped off, and they're like, wait, we can't put him on that plane. Something's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen, but he's not going to go on that plane. So that government official wasn't even on that plane, and that plane blew up. And I don't know how many people were on there, but it's an entire plane of people that had nothing to do with the business, just dead, and as well as the person that came with the briefcase. And one thing he did take care of his family after the fact, but there was a lot of that happened, especially in Medellin around that time, where you could be walking, and there's a lot of people within that, if you meet people in Colombia, that they're like, oh yeah, if they have an older brother or whatever, if they're were around during the 70s, they definitely have a story or two about it, where you could be walking down the street and a car blows up just because you happen to be at the wrong place at the right time. And a lot of people lives were ruined because of it. And although I know that in the Netflix series, it does paint Pablo to be like this bad, even me at a point, I was watching it and I was like, I'm kind of rooting for him. I don't know why I'm rooting for him, but I am kind of rooting for him, because that's a little bit of how the story was built up. And same thing with Griselda. And I think a really big thing is just, there's so many different stories to tell outside of Latin America that we don't need to keep telling the same story over and over and over again of this drug lord and this person and this, and the glorification of all of it. Because again, me as somebody who, my family's from Colombia, I've heard stories of that time, and it was not a good place to be. Because you easily could have got, I mean, it literally didn't matter. If you go into a 7-Eleven and it just so happened that the person right next to you was somebody that was involved in it, you are also going to be collateral damage in that. And people were just upset. It's an upsetting thing. And I think even VH1 did, Michael Corleone kind of touch upon this, that yeah, I did feed into the glorification of the drug cartels. I was a part of that life for a while, but I realized how much harm that does to not only you and your family, but to families that have nothing to do with it, just because you just happen to be there. And VH1 did something, I don't remember what it was called. I think it was called like the Cartel Cruise, which is like no offense, but we shouldn't be like, why are we doing that? That's not a reality TV show. Love is Blind, I get. Too Hot to Handle? Okay, go for it, girl. But like, we don't need to do the Cartel Cruise and talking about like, yeah, my family ran the biggest cocaine, because the drug alone ruins lives, let alone being some sort of whatever involvement that you had within the business. But people are just upset, and I understand why. I think that's why Netflix didn't do it in the same way that Narcos did it, where Pablo Escobar literally was a badass. Like, he was untouchable. He was a man's man. He was for the community. He did do a lot for the community. His wealth was given back to where he kind of grew up in, which is these poor villages that don't really have a lot. And he was giving them these things, and everybody was like, oh, we love you, we love you, we love you. All the while, it's like, in the truth of the situation, it wasn't like that. People were furious. People were angry. You're ruining our country. You're ruining what we love most. It's not even safe to be in our own home because we don't know what's going to happen. Which that was more of the vibe that was actually happening as opposed to what Netflix pushed out. Which is funny that Netflix is always the one doing it. I mean, I guess I understand that there's money behind it. People always want to hear about like the cocaine godmother and how everything was set up. But at the end of the day, like, children died in this situation. Like, I understand that it's really interesting and entertaining to see, but people's lives were ruined for it. And I feel like a lot of the times we kind of pick and choose the things that we want to be upset at. But when it's situations like you're talking about an entire country, and if you, anytime I tell people I'm from Colombia, instantly they're like, do you know Pablo? You know, babies died. A 2-year-old died within this whole massacre of things, and they had nothing to do with it. And that's the only ones that we know about, because a lot of this stuff is kept under wraps. But it's this narrative that just keeps getting pushed out, and then we wonder why we're getting painted as like, oh, Colombia's filled with cocaine and prostitutes and da-da-da-da. And yeah, obviously every country has its bad side. These are third world countries. But if these are the only stories that are getting shared, or these are the only stories that are being brought to light, this is the only way that the audience will ever get to know what it is. I know that whenever people talk about Colombia, they talk about, oh my God, yeah, with the cocaine and da-da-da-da. And it's like not realizing that there's this whole beautiful culture that's behind it. Let's talk about the coffee. Let's talk about anything else, please, for the love of God. It's the only stories that are ever told. And I know that on my specific For You page, when Griselda came out, it was a lot of Latinos just basically being like, we've done this before. And also, to be fair, why did we tell Pablo's story before we told hers? What, like, I understand Pablo Escobar was a huge giant, but that's because he wanted to be. He wanted the attention. He wanted to be a part of the government official. He wanted to make a change for Colombia. In his eyes, his change was put me as one of the government officials, put me in there. I want to run the government, but also backing it with the drug cartel business and, you know, the corruption that is involved with that, because it was very easy to pay off the police in Colombia at that time with just, here, I'll give you this much money and you just don't do anything. If you hear something about me, if my voice comes up, if you hear Pablo Escobar is here, if you hear Griselda Blanco is here, you tell me, I pay you. This is how that works. And that was kind of how it went. And I think I also understand the fury that especially a lot of people from Colombia feel when they see these things, because we do have so many more stories that should be brought to light, but it's just not because I guess it doesn't make as much money. But I don't know, it's an interesting thing. I saw it just because my mom was just like, oh, I want to see it, because my mom was around there during that time, and she goes, you know the lore of Griselda Blanco, you know, which is another thing too. Why did they tell his story before they told hers? That Pablo feared this woman. Everybody feared this woman. This woman was I was going to say an icon and living legend, as if she's Beyonce. This woman was at the top of her game. She created everything that we know now. And again, I'm not saying that it's like props to you, girl, but it's like, let's tell her story first. Can we do this at least in like chronological order? Please, police. I think Pablo Escobar met Griselda when he was 15 years old. And he basically told her, I want to get into the drug game. I want to do it. I don't know how. And she was like, all right, I'll help you out. You can kind of see how I'm moving stuff, and then you can kind of take it upon yourself to do your own thing. And he very much did. But the rage that kind of just comes within of just like, we need to stop sharing. I don't need to see another Griselda Blanco. Also, another thing, if we are going to tell these stories, let's make sure we tell these stories correctly, because it was a 10 episodes, and this was decades of work. So I can also understand when her son would be like, the timeline of it is just all messed up. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't ask to go sit down and, can I do this and this and this? She just did it because she was in charge. It wasn't somebody else that was in charge. It was all hers. So I can understand that part. But again, the glorification of it all, I know it's fun to watch, but these were people's lives. And having kind of that sensitivity around it, I think I'm a little over every time you tell somebody like, oh, I'm from this part, and there's already that like stereotype that's kind of built in because of what they've seen, of what's been kind of pushed out to them. And it's just, I don't know. I think important stories to know, obviously, but it's not the only stories that should be shared. And if you guys are interested in seeing it, definitely go watch the Griselda Netflix biopic, because that was really good. Understand that the timeline of it is not completely correct. There's also Cocaine Cowboys. That was another one that was based off of Griselda Blanco, which told the story a little bit more accurately. And then if you want to hear it from somebody who actually lived it, Michael Corleone goes on a podcast and tells all the discrepancies and gives out the entire timeline of what actually happened during that time. And he says too that he got a little emotional watching it, because he's like, I felt happy at times watching us be a family, be together, because we were very rooted in family. But at the same time, it was a little surreal to see kind of the effect of what my family built. And that's my family's, like, the Blanco legacy is the cocaine infrastructure like we know now, which is crazy. It's crazy to kind of like be a child growing up in that atmosphere, because I'm sure that kind of leaves like these resonating things. And I think that he also had his fair share of life in the business. He's not in it anymore, but yeah, it never ends well for these people. I know that it's glorified, like, oh, these people are amazing. It never ends well for these people. These people end up either in a jail cell, or they're shot dead, or their family is, because that's kind of how it works. It's, if they can't get to you, they're going to get to the things that you love. And whether that's your kids, whether that's your mother, whether that's your wife, doesn't matter what it is. They're going to get what's rightfully theirs, in their opinion. But let's start telling other stories. Let's start telling other stories now. I think we have so much beauty that comes out of South America that we don't need to only just tell about the trials and tribulations that we went through. Because it's just not what it is. Like, Frida Kahlo had a beautiful movie. That was a beautiful movie. Frida Kahlo was amazing. That wasn't from Colombia, but still, it's a beautiful movie from South America. That's a South American queen. That's a beautiful movie. Let's do a little bit more of that. So let's start pushing that. Although, I love it. I love a good biopic. I do. And I think this is one of the first ones of Griselda that kind of went mainstream. And props to Sofia Vergara for doing it, because, girl, I've been watching Modern Family. To see her in that light, to see her from this, just kind of shows how amazing of an actor that she is. Also, just to see kind of that time, it was such a different time than what it is now. It's not even funny. To be able to smuggle drugs in your bra, it's crazy. It's like seeing life pre 9/11 just kind of shows you how things were off the rails, and being able to bring in jets and planes of pounds and pounds and pounds and pounds of cocaine is insane. Although they still do it now. I'm not really sure who's in charge of it now. They don't give me the update like that, so I don't know. But everything that is done now was established in the 70s. And it's crazy that these people still have a lasting impact, although it's not a great impact. It's an impact nonetheless. And although, yeah, we should maybe talk about it, let's not have that be the only thing we talk about. Please. I'm tired of telling people that I'm Colombian, and they think it's also like all those like white frat boys. That it's like, where are you from? Oh, I'm Colombian. Oh, snap. You get some stuff on you? I went to Europe. And I was at a train stop, and then we were talking in Spanish, and they're like, oh, Colombia, you got that stuff? You got that? For the love of God. We have coffee. That's it. We'll give you coffee. Not everybody is a part. I feel like, especially if you're not well, like, cultured, you think that if you're from Colombia, you have some sort of, like, allegiance to Paulo or Griselda, that all of a sudden they were like a cousin, a third removed cousin. Because I've said that to people too as a joke, and they're like, no, wait, no, babe, that, like, make it make sense, make it make sense. But yeah, again, let's not have this be the only stories that we share. This is all we're asking for. That's it. There's a lot of beauty there too, although, you know, there is beauty in the madness. But we told those stories. Those stories are done. I don't need to see another Pablo Escobar documentary. And if you actually want to watch a good one, watch the one from Colombia. Because the Narcos one doesn't do it justice. The one from Colombia, yeesh, they know how to tell the story. Or let them tell their story. God damn it. Now I'm furious. I want to end the episode. Now I'm mad. Now I'm mad because it's true. Because how many times do you hear the whole, like, you're Latina? Oh, you're Colombian? Oh, no way. You have this and this and this. Like, outside of just being called, you're fiery, you're crazy, you're thin. Like, let me not say what I think of y'all. No, don't get me started. But yeah, that was a little bit of my take of the Griselda Netflix show. Good show to watch overall. It was entertaining, but it may have been based on true events. That's not exactly what happened. Do your proper research before you guys start like building your own opinions about it. And also be sensitive to, especially if you're going up to older people and they'll tell you from Colombia, don't just be like, oh, but let's go back, because you never know how their family was affected by that time period. You just really never know, because a lot of people were affected. It wasn't just the people that you see on Netflix. It was many more people. Even Sofia Vergara's brother, I don't know if it was connected to that, but I know that he was killed due to something with the drug cartel. So it happens. It's not there's some sensitivity about it. Just because they put it in a nice little Hollywood production doesn't mean that it still wasn't a really bad time period. And yeah, good show though. Still watch it if you want to watch it, but make sure you also watch the Cocaine Cowboys and the podcast that he's on right now, Michael Corleone, which is I can't believe that she named him after the Godfather. I mean, she was the godmother of cocaine, so it's only fitting. But that's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. We'll be back for another episode next week. Let me know what you guys think of it. Let me know if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. If you watch the show, what you think of the show, if I missed anything out. And yeah, I'll see ya. Bye.